Hello, hello. How's it going, everyone? Good evening. We hope you had a great day. We we were just talking about, I was like, oh, should we open the video by telling everyone about our bedtime? And then Steve goes, yeah, the reason we haven't been around and haven't been doing as many videos is because we've been really great about our bedtime. And we highly encourage you to be, I don't know, get strict about that bedtime, man, because we have been experiencing such joy and long days, and that before midnight sleep is really powerful. I think that's what you've decided is it's the before midnight sleep that makes the biggest difference.
I heard something somewhere that like every hour you sleep before midnight counts as two. But I don't know I don't know why, if it's circadian rhythm or whatever. And what's interesting is that like that's an interesting idea, and I definitely do find that I sleep better, I dream more, I wake up. And it's funny. I wake up feeling more refreshed, and I find that the earlier I go to bed, the more times I wake up in the hours before getting up, like 4, 5, 6. I kind of suddenly wake up and like kind of do that luscious rollover, go back to sleep thing, and I find that it's like this I have this time to kind of like gradually ramp out of sleep. So I have time to kind of go deep into the dark, awayness of complete sort of like, let me just go away for a while. And then I kind of come back in that kind of gradual way. And so I'm not groggy. I pretty much just like jump out of the bed, freaking out, ready in a good way. Like, that for me is a fun thing. Like in an excited kind of off the wall, right? I immediately start singing.
All day. Doesn't
yeah, my singing stamina's gone way up. And then... the other thing I've noticed too is that in terms of being awake in the morning time, so like going to bed before 12, people say that every hour counts twice. I find that every hour I'm awake before 12 noon seems to count twice in terms of productivity and in terms of life. I don't know, it feels like I live more. I live twice as much in the hours before 12 somehow.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I agree.
And it's this really awesome thing, and we've had this really funny and weird shift in our priorities and our values, where it's like about 4:30 in the afternoon, I start like saying, okay, there's things I want to get done today, and I also have to be in bed in the 9s. Now, it's almost always 9:59, but still I go... skidding.
He runs away. Anything that's going on, drop it. He goes
mid conversation, just hang up the phone. But it's a funny thing how it shifts. And so I think that the problem. I mean, I guess maybe not everyone likes to go to bed early. I am not an early to bed person. I'm a stay up late person and a sleep late person. I just like how it feels so much. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, totally.
And I think it's like a conscious experimentation with lifestyle and playing with this stuff. And if you do something and it works for you, I think probably that's the main message, that if you just, sometimes things will come up and you'll just kind of happen to do things a little differently, and you like it better or it enriches your experience, I would like follow that smell. You know what I'm saying? When you get on that scent, I would follow that, because it's amazing what those things can do. When something wonderful happens sort of by accident, my immediate thought is, how can I regiment this thing? How can I systematize this? How can I kind of carve out a space in my life, in my routine, in my relationships, and all the things that are true and that tend to kind of feed into and dictate my behavior? How can I tweak those things to accommodate this new thing? Because there's always a way to do it, but it almost never happens all by itself. You know what I mean? And so whether it's about going to bed early for you, or eating a certain thing, or eating whatever, I don't know. When you find those things, make a point of like carving them out, and it takes a little kind of tactical application of willpower to do those things that our current circumstances and situations aren't necessarily set up to accommodate or to make easy. But that's the time to use the willpower. And to recognize that that it seems like my world and my life is fighting against my doing this, only because my world and my life has not yet had an opportunity to calibrate itself to my consistent doing of this thing. And so, take heart, don't be discouraged if it feels like your kids and your job and your everything is conspiring against doing whatever this new thing is. You just kind of like plow that thing through. My big thing is like, I'm going to do what I have to do in order to go to bed. I make that my one priority. You know what I'm saying? And I leave things undone. I long enough to get that thing kind of inculcated into my routine. And then at some point it kind of becomes accepted, like the new kid at school. I mean, habits, new behaviors and stuff like this. It's like the new kid at school kind of gets a little pushed around, a little bullied or whatever. And then eventually, though, they're sort of invited in. And I find that's the way with these positive habits, these things that kind of enrich what it's like to be me. Is like, if I can just like, if you can just hang in there going to bed early, if you can just hang in there exercising, if you can just hang in there eating these particular things, eventually the life is going to kind of welcome you in. You know what I mean? The routine's going to embrace you.
It's the same thing with awareness too. Like the more you kind of like stick with it. It's like for a while, it's like, oh, is this even working? I'm not gonna be able to stick with this. But if you just keep doing it, and that's really, we love all like the life hack stuff too, because that really, it's part of our whole thing is like this ever better life philosophy, which is like chase those good feelings, figure out like what maximally improves my experience and how can I like take this thing and work it into my experience so it becomes a part of me. And so, Steve is really good at this because he just sees something and he's so goal oriented. Is like, I want to feel the way I feel after I do this thing all of the time. Have you ever done like a stretch or gone to yoga and you never go to yoga or you never do a certain thing and then you finally do it and it's like, oh, I feel so good. Oh, if I only did this all the time. It's like, become a person who says, I really should do this all the time and actually does it. There's a big difference between those people because you don't kind of like, keep your future self in mind. A lot of times we talk about all these different selves we are throughout the day and paying attention to like which self of you like actually makes good decisions and gets things done and which version of yourself tends to be a little more lazy, and keep that person in mind. Because energy levels do fluctuate. There are different things that go on in the day, but the more of these really great things you can start incorporating, we love it. I mean, we love just doing things that feel really good to have done. Like, I hate when when I get out of the routine of running, I don't like the way I feel better when I do run than when I don't run. But I do love coming back to it after having not done it in a while, because it's like a breath of fresh air. It's like, oh my gosh, how could I have ever stopped doing this great thing?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's funny. I think that there's like two skills that are really cool that have helped me a lot, and that help me every time I get better at them. And the first thing is get good at doing things that feel good. And that seems kind of silly, but I think that there's a lot about life that kind of trains us out of being good at doing things that feel good. You know what I'm saying? Is that we don't automatically do, and I had to kind of build that within myself, this tendency that like, if I do something and my body rewards me, if I do something and my brain or my life rewards me, or someone in my world responds well to something that I do, you don't have to tell me twice. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it worked, let me do it again. So that's the first thing. Get good at doing things that feel good, things that produce results that feel good. So, and then the other thing is get good at feeling good while doing things that will feel good to have done. Get good at feeling good while doing things that will feel good to have done. Because if you can create kind of a reconciliation between, or if you can kind of bring together, create a confluence or coming together of things that will feel good to do now and things that will feel good once you've done them, don't you see that you're in a really lovely and wonderful place? And that's kind of one of the things that we work with a lot too, is it's learning to kind of engineer a positive experience of productive things that are enriching for us, so that we are more inclined to do those things. Because life, it's really not about suffering, especially when you've got a neurology, when you've got a brain that's as capable as yours. You can build completely new experiences of behaviors that in the past have not been particularly enjoyable for you. And so, like, sometimes you just need to drop behaviors because they're just not worth doing, or you just don't like them, and you only feel like you need to do them because someone told you should, and that's one thing. But then there's a lot of other things around there that are kind of should behaviors that could be really lovely. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, I think about, like, for example, the like arranged marriage, which isn't a very attractive kind of thing in general to me. I would feel kind of like a little, I'm a kind of a picky person. I don't like to be told what to do. But I can imagine a situation where there would be an arranged marriage between two people who were very happy together. They were actually perfectly matched. But still, it would be better if maybe they could have found each other naturally. They might have enjoyed it more. And I feel like that's how things work, like with fitness, with exercise, with eating well, with going to bed early. It's like analogy. These are actually really lovely behaviors. These are these could be the love of your life in terms of your routine and stuff. But because your parents or your coaches or your teachers or somebody said, look, you got to do all this. You know what I mean? I swear, the reason I love exercise so much is that I grew up around exercise equipment that was never used. I think that if the people in my family, I'm so grateful that my family was so sedentary, because I think if they would have been really active, I probably would have said, geez, all they ever do is exercise. Oh my God, now I get to be that guy, But I think that's one of those things.
That's all
like,
Steve does is exercise. You guys, if you wonder what Steve does when we're not on these videos, he's excising.
Yeah,
and writing.
Talking to someone about this, talking to people about things that I thought about when exercising or doing something else.
Yeah.
And that's just for me. It's what I enjoy most of all, is those free pockets. That's just what happens. So, some interesting stuff about habits and all that. We're going to talk about fear now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. This could have evolved into a very different topic if we hadn't have chosen a title already.
I know. Oh, yeah, you can make yourself ahead of time.
Yeah.
Okay, so we want to talk to you about fear, because one of these things in it's sort of in personal growth and spiritual growth. You okay?
I'm good.
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks. I know. Need some water?
No, I'm fine.
Good, because I think it's empty. One of the things you hear a lot in personal growth, spiritual growth, is like almost fear of fear, aversion to fear. You want to have freedom from fear. You want to get away from fear. All the, fear is kind of a bad thing. You know what I mean? In general. And I was thinking about that. And it's like my experience of that more and more is just not true. And I think what a lot of the time what it is that we tend to have a dysfunctional relationship to fear. And then we tend to, by default, sort of assign the consequences of that dysfunctional relationship that we might have to fear itself. We tend to attribute those things to fear itself. And this is actually, we're working on in the Resolve community, which is really great. It's a great time to join that, by the way, because next month is going to be really fantastic. Doing relationships. And very often what will happen in the past for me is that I will interact with a person in a less than resourceful way. And then I will create consequences that I do not want. For example, they'll behave towards me in certain ways, or I'll get certain responses from them or whatever. And then I'll have this tendency to attribute to that person the consequences of my less than resourceful interaction with them, or response to whoever it was they were at the given moment in time. And I find that's sometimes the case with emotional states too, is that we get really freaked out about being freaked out. When it's like, if you don't freak out about being freaked out, if you just freaked out, it's actually not that bad. And fear is kind of that way too. And it is a useful thing. You've got this animal brain that gets concerned about the prospects of certain things happening. Why is it that the experience of fear is so often an unproductive and an unpleasant and a sort of never-ending and this kind of like recursive, just like on and on kind of thing? And there's this really interesting concept, and it's called TOTE. It's an acronym. It's test, operate, test, exit. And it's this idea that it's an information processing kind of thing. And so basically what this would happen is like, what would functional fear be? Functional fear would be something that moves me to do things that serve my intentions, that serve my purpose. Yes, that's the purpose of fear or of aversion, of what I don't want thoughts, is so that I can look around in my environment and I can say, oh, what outcome is it that I want to create? Okay, what options are available to me? How can I rearrange reality such that my desired outcome is the one that's most likely to come about? Or how can I rearrange reality so that my less than desired outcome doesn't happen? I don't want to be late. What can I do right now to make it so I'm not late? I can put my stuff by the door. I can lay my clothes out, so on and so forth. Once I've done all that stuff, I shouldn't be fearing it anymore. You know what I'm saying? That's the purpose of fear. And so to kind of like put this test operate thing into action, what would the first thing be? First step, test. That would be, okay, what can I do to create the outcome I want or avoid the outcome I don't want? Right, so I've been made aware of the possibility of missing out something I do want, or of having something happen that I don't want. I say to myself, okay, what can I do to increase the chances of things going the way I want to? And then I operate. Now, operate means I do that stuff. I think of things and then I do them, which is very interesting. And it seems obvious, but a lot of people don't do that. And a lot of the time in the past, I haven't done that either. Then what do? I test, I operate. Is there something I can do? Then I do it. That's operation. Then I test again. And I say, is there anything else that I can do to make it more, any more likely than it is that I'm going to get the outcomes that I want? And I'm going to get one of two answers. Either the answer is yes, in which case I start over again. I go back and I operate. I do those things. Or I exit, which is the E in TOTE, which is I step outside of the fear cycle. Do you know what I'm saying? What a lot of people do, though, is they don't have an exit. They have a test. Some people test, and then they don't do anything. Some people test and they operate, and then they still just keep worrying. Other people test, operate, and they just keep going over and over and over again. They don't have an exit. Do you know what I'm saying? And I think that's one of the really important things about these thoughts. Oh my gosh, did I offend so-and-so? That's kind of a fear or an anxiety that somebody might have. Well, you can test. You can say, oh, did they seem upset? Did I have an indication that they were upset? I can maybe ask somebody else and gather some information about it. And if, in fact, it turns out that they were, I can do certain things about that. I can operate. I can maybe apologize to them and say, hey, if I came off this way or that way or the other way. You know what I'm saying? If I'm laying in bed at night, is there anything I can do about it? No. Maybe make a note to myself to talk to them tomorrow. And then I leave. Then I exit that whole thing. But for a lot of people, what happens is that they do not have that exit strategy. And I don't know if you've ever been in a roundabout. Some people love roundabouts, some people hate them. But like the whole point of the roundabout is that you go in and you get out. It's like the roundabout's purpose.
Unless you're Steve and you just drive around it and around it
Yeah.
for fun.
Yeah, I mean, just to mess with other people. I was like, I wonder if anyone will see us, and if they'll wonder if I wonder
he's confused.
if I'm like an actual idiot or like an intentional idiot. Anyway, you want to have these exits, and a lot of the time, what happens is that people end up hating roundabouts, and it's because they're not good at exiting them. It's not because roundabouts aren't potentially useful. Do you know what I'm saying? It's the same thing with fear. It's the same thing with anxiety. It's not that these states aren't potentially useful or that they don't have a resourceful role to play in our lives. If they didn't, they wouldn't exist. You know what I'm saying? Our neurology wouldn't have the capacity to experience those things if they didn't have some role to play in our succeeding in the game of life, whether it's surviving, thriving, creating the stuff we want or whatever. And I think really important is learning to engineer these exits. I mean, and to think of it, make it a conscious process, because for a lot of people, it's like a worm, like a software worm. What happens is that these things just get into software and it starts corrupting data and information, and it just keeps going from one thing to the next, and it messes this up, then it messes this up, then it messes this up. And for a long time, there wasn't anything you could do to stop them. Do you know what I'm saying? It was like once it was in, it just kept going. It was just this kind of like infinite thing. And that is how, like, if you've ever been kind of caught up in that before, or kind of like internal dialogue, or you just can't, like, you think yourself into this just kind of like Christmas vacation size big jumble of tangle of Christmas lights, and you can't get out of it. That's like you went around and around and around and around and around and around, and then every time you go around the fear thing, it's like I'm afraid of an outcome, and then I go around it again, I generate additional fear. Do you know what I'm saying? For every additional round that I go, and if I'm not doing the operation, then I'm really just I'm caught up in this thing, and it's out of control. And so I think that's a really useful thing to do, is that you have to watch for the exit, and you have to say, have I done everything I can about? I mean, and that's the thing for me, is like, if I'm going to have this little voice in my head that's pestering me, I'm going to talk to it directly. I don't want to try to ignore it, because it's just going to keep going, hey, Steve, hey, Steve, hey, Steve, hey, Steve, you know, they might be upset about what you did or said or whatever. I would rather just say, hang on a second, let me test this. Is there something that I could possibly be, is there something that could be going wrong? Is there something that could happen that I don't want to have happen? Is it possible that I said something that made someone feel some way I didn't want to make them feel? Yes or no? Then I say, is there something I can do about it, right? Is there something right now that I can do about it? Then I go do those things. Then I test again and say, did I forget anything? You know, it's like when you're packing the car to go somewhere. Did I forget anything in the house? And if you go and you didn't, there's nothing else that you can do. You exit that and you move on to another problem. You move on to another subject. You close that loop and you get out of it, rather than just doing this kind of regression. You know what I mean? And I feel like permission to do that, and an explicit kind of algorithm for deciding when to, is immensely liberating.
That's so fascinating, just that whole thing that you described. And it makes me think of like someone who is like OCD, and it gets stuck in these loops, whether it's compulsive thinking, compulsive doing of something, but you're just stuck, and it's like you can't get out. And very interestingly, from the German New Medicine perspective, and like what Dr. Hammer found about like people like with so much overwhelming trauma, that they kind of like, it almost makes me think that they are kind of like stuck in a certain loop, a certain feedback loop where they can't break out of it, because it's almost adaptive to stay almost frozen, not making any progress in any area, because it's like, well, don't go too far, because we need to fix whatever's going on right here and right now. And so people who have psychological manifestations, whether it's bulimia or OCD or schizophrenia or, I mean, Tourette's, you name it, like there's something that just keeps going on and they're not exiting it. And I think that being able to recognize that, or at least start watching it, you can learn so much from what is compelling me to do this thing, because it does just seem so automatic, just like everything in life, whether you have some kind of diagnosed condition or if it's like subclinical and you do things continually that don't work in your relationships. You say things to people, you do things in your finances that predictably don't work, but you're not watching. You don't know how you do it. Lately, I've been really kind of watching my buying strategy for things, because it's Cyber Monday and Black Friday and there's all these sales and stuff. And I've always had kind of like a very dysfunctional relationship with money. So looking at my buying strategy and when is it time to feel bad or to worry about something, it's like, gosh, this is so interesting. And when you start watching these internal behaviors, when you start really studying yourself and how you get yourself to do something, to say something, to do a behavior, to engage in something, to feel bad. When you start watching this and see how you put these feelings together, you will start to see the exit point, because there's always an exit point. It's just you're missing it because you're not paying attention. And so you keep going back through the loop and going back through the loop, and you keep worrying about it, and you keep freaking out about it, and you keep staying in that adaptive state of just freak out mode. It's because you're not paying attention to where you could be exiting this strategy.
Well, yeah, it's an interesting thing too about like OCD, because as far as I can tell, the fact that a person can, I mean, when you, with that's a phenomenological description of a person's behavior. As a person doesn't have or isn't OCD, they engage in behaviors that if another person who went to school for too long looks at them and they say, oh, that's called dir 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 dir. Let's pick 3 letters out of the alphabet to unhelpfully describe what you're doing. It doesn't tell you anything about how to do something different instead. And the interesting thing to me about OCD is that it's essentially one of these big loops with a lot of loops inside of it. You know what I'm saying? That's all that is that I've got like 45 little loops that I can't exit, or that I have a very strange, I have to go around it 47 times before I can get out of it. And one of the things for me was like, instead of, I don't necessarily think the ability to do what's called OCD is a problem. I think it's not being able to exit. It's not being able to not do it. It's not being able to do something else instead. And that's a different way of approaching people. It's like you've got a certain skill set here. And it may be under certain circumstances that skill set would be useful. Like, for example, the circumstances in which you developed it, right? Escaping something, creating some kind of sensation of control or whatever. It's like, that's fine. You built that whole apparatus there. We don't need to take it apart. We just need to make an exit so that you have the ability to exit that. I'm not going to be it. Because people who tend to exhibit that kind of behavior don't do it all the time. And I found that very useful. And I remember one of the first people I worked with, they were an obsessive compulsive kind of person. It was one of the, in the list of things that they had. And I asked her, how do you know when it's time to be OCD? Do you know what I'm saying? Because you don't seem to be that way now. Like, how do you know when it's time? And as she became kind of more and more conscious of that, she started to recognize, oh, you know what? There's things I'm doing. I didn't know this, but there were things that I'm doing that lead me into this thing. I gotta enter this loop, and then I gotta get so fast going around it that I don't even see the exit. And then I go inside that loop. There's a whole bunch of other little loops, and I gotta go around this one 57 times, and that one 49 times, and this one 300 times, and I gotta flip this switch, and I gotta check to make sure that there's nothing broken in the bathroom, and then I gotta look and make sure there's not mold on the, and it was just all this different stuff. And I was like, well, what if you could just exit the whole version of that? Like, what if you could just totally, we don't have to make you not that anymore, but what if you just had the ability to go do something else instead? And that was really useful. And I think that one of the things, usually people who get diagnosed with things, in my personal experience, and I work with people, I don't work with diagnoses, and I can't know about any of that crap. So I just work with the person, which is really nice. Is that usually people who get a diagnosis, especially like with a mental illness kind of thing, they're usually better at doing things that don't work, that we all do. They're just like expert level at it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, everybody daydreams, but there's certain people who can actually daydream so vividly that it looks like there's someone actually in the room. That's a skill that I want to have, and I want to be in control of it. You know what I'm saying? There's things that I can learn from somebody who can create a picture of reality that's so compelling and convincing to them that it looks absolutely real as anything else. It's like, yeah, that'd be really nice to have in the DMV. I mean, that would be something that would be profoundly useful, because one thing about people who have positive hallucinations, who see things that aren't there, one of the problems that they don't complain about is boredom. And that's something that a huge portion of the world actually does complain about and suffer over, and they sit there and they're bored, and so they start coming up with problems. You know what I mean? And so when I look at a person and they're dealing with something like that, it's like, as far as I can tell, the problem's not that you're capable of doing this, it's that you don't yet have fully conscious choice about whether and when and to what extent and for how long you're going to do whatever it is that you're doing. That's a different approach. To me, it's kind of a more humble approach. It's a more curious and interested approach in the person, and it recognizes the skills that people really have. You know what I'm saying? And if I have a skill and I use it in the wrong context, it could be absolutely catastrophic, but it doesn't change the fact that it's a skill. And if I can infuse that skill or that ability with consciousness, it could have a profoundly powerful, positive effect in their life. It's like the capacity to experience fear is a skill. Now, a lot of the time, it's kind of a pain in the ass, you know what I'm saying? Because we aren't really necessarily conscious in when we fire up the old fear strategy. But when you can become deliberate in that, and you can use that, you know what I'm saying? You can exercise conscious choice about when you're going to feel fear and whether you're going to feel fear and to what extent. Like, I don't want to be in a situation where I'm confronted by a maniac with a machete and I don't feel afraid. Do you know what I mean? I want to feel that. And there's like certain other things that I want the ability to think of what I don't want and say, oh, what can I do to maximize the chances of something other than that happening? That for me is a really useful skill, but I don't want to get caught up in that loop. I don't want to forget where the exit is. I don't want to unconsciously choose to do it over and over and over and over again when doing it once would be enough to get me the result that I want. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I mean, how many times, I don't know, if you're doing anything. I mean, if you're like typing a word on the computer, how many times do you want to do it? Do you want to do it just once, as many times as it takes, or do you want to do it 75 times? I mean, obviously, most people would just want to do it once, but what we do is that we do the kind of emotional equivalent of that. We feel the fear 100 times. Just feel the fear once and say, okay, that tells me something I don't want. What can I do to maximize the chances of what I do want? Let me check. Okay, it's this number of things. This is really funny because when I was a kid, I was like borderline. I don't know if it was some neurological stuff that happened to me or if I was just kind of strange, but like I had intense kinesthetic like feelings. I would get these like horrific sensations and I would just freak out. Like I couldn't have my fingernails clipped. There's like 2 shirts that I could wear because I had such a strong texture aversion to things. I would become obsessive and compulsive about things. Like I would be convinced that I hadn't locked the door. I become convinced that the iron had been left on, and I'd make my mom turn around, and I couldn't tie my shoes because I couldn't stand the texture. And so I had like a lot of things that I had to like engineer my way out of, you know? And it took me a long time to realize, oh, not everyone has these problems. Not everyone does this stuff. Do you know what I mean? And it's funny, when we started doing this awareness, this is, you know, a couple decades later, this stuff started coming up for me again. And like the iron. I mean, how many times we were like halfway to where were we going?
Austin,
Texas. And Texas is a big state, and we were a long way away from there. And I became convinced that we had left the iron on, and that it was going to burn the house down with a dog in it. And I was so upset. We had actually literally had to turn around, and I knew that I hadn't left it on. But still, I was so good at creating the fear that I had that I convinced myself that it might be on, even though I knew it wasn't. And first of all, it's like, she's probably going to break up with me, 1. But then 2, I was like, if I can do this, what if I did this with something else? Like, what if I became so convinced that I could help people? What if I became so convinced that I could be successful? Do you know what I'm saying? So convinced that the things that I wanted in life were possible and that the answer to the questions that I had in life was literally right in front of me. What if I could become so convinced that I looked and there's nothing there and I just doubted that nothingness and I said, no, there's something here, it's something here, it's here, it's here, it's here. What would that be like, you know? And so I just got that weird kind of thing pointed in that direction, and it's been really useful for me. And I think that one of the huge things for us is, and this is kind of like the whole thing about the buying strategy, we get so caught up in our strategies for doing things. We get so caught up in the kind of kinesthetic feelings that go along with it. Like if you're going to do something, you got to have a motivational strategy. And at some point you build that motivation. If I'm going to do something with fear, I got to create that fear. I got to think certain things, make certain pictures, say things to myself, say, oh, I don't know about that. Or, oh, what about so-and-so? Or you didn't do those things? Or, oh, remember last time? Or whatever, with that sort of irritating voice. And I get so caught up in the consequences of that strategy that I don't notice the strategy itself. You see what I mean? I think a thought, and then it creates a negative feeling inside myself. And I mean, like in my body, there's a sensation somewhere, and that sensation grabs my attention so fast and so thoroughly that I don't notice that it's thinking that's giving rise to it. And I don't notice the behavioral consequences of this kind of like loop that I'm caught up in. And essentially what that comes down to, I think, is that we run into trouble when we can't recognize a decision until after we've made it. And like for me, for a really long time, I had absolutely no idea what it looked like to decide to eat 30 chocolate chip cookies from Whole Foods. I knew what it looked like afterwards, but I couldn't see it from the front end. Do you know what I'm saying? It was like I had to make the decision to recognize that I had made the decision. And at some point I said to myself, I got to figure out how to see this thing coming. You know what I'm saying? Because I don't want to, oh shit, I ate those cookies again. Well, here we are. You know what I mean? And it was a Netflix 3 hours insulin coma. I had to recognize how to do it kind of from the front end. I knew it was possible. I just wasn't seeing it. And so that is for a lot of, like, you know, if you're doing something that's not serving you, it's not happening to you. It's something that you're doing. That's one of the principles that we work with. And we work with it not to be mean or anything, but because it's helped us a lot. And the problem is that I'm doing it outside of awareness. And when I'm doing it outside of awareness, it feels like it's just happening. It feels like it's being done to me. So I'm making these decisions. And one thing I've noticed is that when I make a decision outside of awareness, it doesn't look like a decision at all. It doesn't look, it's a decision in disguise. I have to somehow or other become aware of exactly what I'm doing so I can watch myself do it. So that the next time I have an opportunity to do that thing, I can watch myself starting to do it and say, either no, I'm not going to do this, or oh, this will be interesting. Let me watch myself do this again, and you'll get pulled into that experience because again, these are strategies for creating behavior, and behavior is fueled by emotion. Behavior is fueled by feeling. The interesting thing about emotions and feeling is that for most people, when you generate an intense emotion, an emotion that's intense enough to create a behavior, the emotion grabs your attention so much that it pulls your attention away from the things that you are doing that give rise to that emotion inside you. And what happens then is that it feels like the feeling's just happening. You know what I mean? Because the feeling grabs your attention, and it's kind of a pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Pay no attention to the auditory thoughts that are going on or the visual pictures that you're making inside your head. I guess there's not any other kind of picture than visual, but you know what I'm saying. Visual thoughts that you're making inside your head. Don't look at that stuff. Look at the screen. Don't look at the projector. And it's learning to look at the projector and see what's going on there that allows you to, it gives you the freedom to be immersed in the experience or to be engineering kind of a new and different one.
Yeah, that's a really great question. Well, what did Jamie say? So yeah, a straightener, oven, timer on the microwave, all the things she forgets or feels like she may have left on. Mm-hmm. Penny goes, is there a G&M explanation for procrastination? And that's a really great question because we just covered that. Was that this month? Too slow conflict? I think before November. And so there's not a G&M thing for procrastination, like the behavioral manifestation of you not doing things not knowing your strategy for motivation. So you always end up like doing things right at the last minute. So there's not like a G&M explanation for that. It's a behavioral pattern, but there is a result of feeling too slow, feeling behind, tied to thyroid issues. So if you are also having issues with your thyroid, the root cause of that could be a feeling too slow conflict. But we talk about that. The module is absolutely phenomenal because we talk about our existential positions. So like the reason that you procrastinate, it could be a manifestation of you not feeling okay as a person. We have these existential positions, like this way we feel about ourselves. We kind of either feel like I'm okay, I'm basically good and okay in this world, or I'm basically fundamentally flawed, broken, not okay, something's wrong with me. And so we can manifest something like procrastination, and it's just an easy scapegoat as an excuse to say, there's something wrong with me fundamentally as a person, and here I am, I'm late, I procrastinate, I can never get anything done on time. So that could be one reason you're procrastinating, and then another is just not having good strategies for getting the outcomes that you want. And so that's kind of the stuff we're talking about today, and paying attention to how do I get myself to procrastinate. Look forward to the next time you procrastinate and watch yourself do it. Watch yourself, know that there's something that you could do right now that if you did it, but see, the thing is there's a pressure. This is what I've noticed for myself is like, I don't take the action to do something unless there's a certain amount of time pressure and I can see the window shrinking of the time that's okay to finish this thing.
I can see the window shrinking. I'm a very visual person here. Now it's talking about pressure. Mm-hmm. And you said time pressure, but where do you feel time pressure in your body?
Where do I feel time pressure?
I don't think it's in the
on
clock,
the calendar.
Right? It's on the calendar?
Yeah.
Is there a physical sensation in your body when you look at the calendar?
It just kind of runs up my spine. It's like, oh, you better get going now.
Yeah, it just kind of, it's like it doesn't matter. It just kind of runs up my spine. This is very funny when you talk to people like this because they want you to believe the things that drive their experience don't really matter. Right. So I see the window shrinking. Oh, is there a feeling? Oh, not really. Oh, the feeling's in the calendar. And then you go, well, is there somewhere in your body? Oh, no, it just kind of runs up my spine. It's like, if something runs up my spine, I'm sort of like, whoa, it's time to go. You know what I mean? That's hilarious. And that's really interesting. How do you know when it's time to procrastinate? And how do you know when it's time to stop procrastinating? Because I bet you do a really great job getting things done on time. And if not on time, kind of on time, sort of in an acceptable amount of time. It'd be very interesting. So that's how you know when it's time to take action.
Yeah.
Is that when you see the window shrinking so much that there's a sensation that jolts up your spine. Yeah. And that's interesting. And I mean, so what happens is, so she tests, and she checks inside and she says, is there a bolt of lightning shooting up my spine? And she says no, and then she's okay. Well, let's get on Instagram or let's do whatever, right? and so I don't is the lightning bolt up your spine? Is the sensation up your spine unpleasant, or is it just?
No, it's just like, get going.
Yeah. So the thing is,
do the thing.
Yeah. How can we get the
Finish
lightning
the
bolt up your
project.
spine early? I mean, what would happen if
Exactly.
you did it then? And
Plus, that's what I've been working with too, is like paying attention to a block of time that it's like, doing something, and it's one of those weird things at first. It's like, oh, I could do that, but I don't feel like I have to do that. And so that.
What does that mean? What does that mean? I don't feel it going up my spine?
Yeah, I don't feel like I have to do it. And so I can do other things. But when I start considering my future self and saying, do I want to be a person, and I have to ask myself that, do I want to be a person who waits till the last minute and gets things done? And it's like, I would just prefer the way it feels, because I also, that whole strategy comes along with a lot of negative feelings of, rushing and not having enough time to complete something in the way I'd like it to be done, and beating myself up for not having started earlier. And so, because when I can see that early in the month, if I've got something that I need to have finished by the end of the month, if I can see it early in the month and I can take that into consideration and watch the whole process, I can get myself motivated and complete a whole something in a day if I really wanted to. So yeah, that is a
Danielle asked a good question here. I'm trying to get to it. And I've talked so long I forgot what it was about. How do you maintain that change in perspective? Which one? I feel like we've talked about 1,000 of them. Sorry, I should have gotten to it earlier. But yeah, if you tell me what perspective you're talking about, I can hopefully have something useful to say about it. Sorry, can you do that? I can't get the screen out of my criteria. So the issue there is like your criteria for getting started. Let me just stop trying to mess with the phone. Like your criteria for starting. Procrastination, when we talk about it like as almost as a character defect, the future self is a big thing. It's crazy because the idea of doing my future self a favor is somehow or another a concept that like gets the pilot light lit. I don't know if you've ever had an issue with the water heater or the heater, and it's like these things are wonderful. They'll go for months and you won't have an issue unless the pilot light goes out. And sometimes machines that will run perfectly once the light is lit absolutely don't want to light again. You know what I mean? And I think one of the things is like, how do you get your pilot light lit? Because very often when it comes to procrastination, it's that thing, once you get started, you're good, you're going, but how do you get the pilot light lit? And it's criteria. How do you know when it's time to start? Because if you'll look at the difference in your internal experience, in how you think, in the thing, like literally the things that you say to yourself and the tone in which you say them, and the physical sensations in your body, like when you look at your watch or when you look at the calendar or when you look at whatever it is that lets you know what time it is versus, when you need to have something done, there are certain sensations that come along with that. And you're checking inside to see if it's time to start. And there's a difference between when you do start and when you don't. And if you can find out what that difference is, you can start kind of moving things around so that you can get yourself to do things in a time that suits you better. And for a lot of people, it really is literally just switching around some criteria. It's not a character defect. It's not a flaw. It's not that you're not allowed to be successful. There's a lot of people who are allowed to be successful or be successful and relaxed or whatever. And it's like there's a fuse that sort of needs to be replaced, or there's a wire that's connected to the wrong junction and you get it connected to the right one, where you say, oh, I have time to get this done. And I have time to get this done and do something else wonderful too. I have time to get this done and then relax before it's over. Versus, for me, for a long time, the criteria was, am I at that point where I have to just like sprint the whole time in order to slide the paper under the professor's door at literally the last second? And that was the moment at which I would start doing it, And once I recognized, because I would check inside, and there was a certain feeling in my chest that was not time to start, and it was smooth. I'm a very kind of like feeling-based thinker, and it was like a smooth, inaccessible, almost like Teflon. I couldn't get a grip on it. And I would feel that feeling, and then I would make a picture in my mind of James Gandolfini, and then I would sit down in front of my laptop and watch 4 episodes of The Sopranos. And I watched over and over and over again. I was like, oh, that feeling tells me it's time to make a picture of what I'm going to do instead of what I really what would feel good to have done. And once I figured that out, I started noticing myself making that picture. And I was like, oh, I'm engineering in myself a disinclination to do the thing that I actually really want to do. And I also noticed that I would really talk myself out of doing things before it was time to start them. And I said, that's really funny. And I would have to really talk myself into doing things. But if I started at the last minute, I didn't have to talk myself into it. I just there's no time to talk. We got to go. But if I had a chance, my inclination was to persuade myself out of doing things. It would be really wonderful. And it was kind of like this, oh, you're already making this amount of money. You just need to take it easy and relax. It was like when I wanted to do the project, it was when I wanted to do the thing, but this little voice came on and was like, you don't need to do that. You've already got enough clients. You're helping it. And I was like, but wait a minute though. But it feels really good to help people and make money. And if I did it 3 times as much, I'd probably feel 3 times as good. Why am I engineering disinclination to do the stuff that I really want to do? And more importantly, how am I doing it? And once you figure out how you do something, you know also how not to do it. Okay, see there, if I just ramble long enough, I'll get it right. So it really is. It's about watching that stuff, and it's about noticing these things. And I think probably one of the master skills is, can you kind of walk and chew gum at the same time? Can you create an experience, right? And be in the experience and watch yourself create the experience and watch yourself experiencing the experience all at the same time. So that's 4 things, right? Create an experience, you got it, you're good. Experience an experience, you got that one down. You're a genius, right, at that. You're like, the unconscious mind or whatever beats your heart like 100,000 times a day. You don't have to think about it. You're experiencing from, beginning to end. You're creating and you're having the experience. The thing is, can I watch myself creating my experience while creating it and while having it? And can I watch myself have it? Can I observe myself having that experience? Now, I don't mean, when people talk about dissociation, what that means sometimes is almost like walling yourself off psychically so that you are, basically it's almost like you insulate yourself so that you're not even in the experience anymore. I'm saying stay in the experience, but have a little part of you kind of watch. Do you know what I mean? Or have kind of like, we use the example of Super Mario 64 was like the first 3D Mario game where like you could see, like you could have a camera angle that was like almost right out of Mario's eyeballs. It's like right above his head, or you could zoom really far out. And it's like you want to have those different camera angles so that you can see things from different angles and you can get different perspectives on things. And so like for you, like if you were to shrink, if you were to see yourself feeling like it wasn't time to start, and you were to see yourself looking at a window that was just too big for you to feel that feeling up your spine, you'd say, oh, the reason that I feel like it's not time to start is that the damn window is too big. Well, just shrink the window down a little bit. It'd be very interesting just to play with that.
Just got it.
Oh, there it was.
I gotta get off the video. I got stuff to do.
Isn't that, well, actually, yeah, I think you probably do, right? Because it's only supposed to be 30 minutes, like so much for that. But yeah, that's a really interesting thing. And it gives you a wonderful amount of control over your life experience. The one thing that I would kind of put in here is that if you haven't done a lot of this stuff or played with this stuff, it can seem kind of out there or kind of weird. The world is full of people who have heard about these ideas and these techniques, and they talk about them and they teach about them, but they don't actually use them. In order for you to really derive the maximum amount of skill from this, you have to practice this stuff enough. And this isn't like hard, intense practice. It's very casual, easy practice. It's very just kind of like, oh yeah, I'm on the neighborhood tennis team, and it's not very competitive. It's kind of like that. You know what I mean? Not like I'm on, like I got to win the championship. It's just casual stuff where you tie this stuff to your experience. You know what I mean? Like I talked about this stuff for forever before I actually watched it in myself, and before I got to the point where I could listen to things that like you were saying about how you were feeling and say, ooh, that's interesting. That's useful information. You want to take this stuff from like sort of like tingly, interesting idea town to like know it in your bones, feel it just in your guts, just know it's true. I moved that feeling. I watched that thing happen. I created that different outcome. I am now exiting the fear loop. And you give yourself permission just to close that thing off. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like if you, I'm trying to think, if you clean the kitchen in the evening time, like after dinner. Sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. But you go in there, you have a little routine. You clean the counter and you kind of look and look at the dishes are over there drying or they've been put away, depending on how strict you are. And the counter's clean and it's a certain, maybe it's wet because you use a damp cloth, but it's not like soaking wet. There's not standing water there. I look at that and I know know? That's an okay amount of wet. That'll just kind of air dry. But if there's a big puddle or something like that, I'm like, how do I know? I got criteria. Do you know what I'm saying? But then at some point, I look at the kitchen and I say, it's good. I close the kitchen loop and I rush into the bed because it's 9:58 and I must be in bed in the nights. I know it's time to move on. The thing is, it's a little bit kind of more challenging to do this with internal experiences. I've worried about my daughter enough for today. I've worried about my boss enough for today. I've done everything I can to do everything I can to make sure that the outcome that I want to have happen or the thing I don't want to have happen will or won't happen. And so now what I'm going to do is close that loop, and and I know that loop's going to open up tomorrow. Like when you're eating, you eat until you feel full or until you've had enough or maybe until you just absolutely can't eat anymore. And you don't worry that you're not going to remember to eat again. You know what I mean? Like I eat a meal and there's a sensation inside that says, okay, it's time to stop eating, you're good. And I put the food away and I just kind of trust that when it's time to eat something again, I'm going to get a little reminder. When it's time to consider worrying about so-and-so or this outcome or their results or what they think about me, I'll do it again. I mean, it's funny. Caring about what other people think about you is not such a bad thing as long as you have an exit strategy for it. Say, do they think I'm a good person? Is there anything I can do to change how they feel? Yes or no. If there is, do those things if you want to do them. If you feel like doing them, you test again, say, is there anything I can do about it? Then exit the strategy, which is to kind of say, to hell with them. Or, it's their problem if they can't do anything after that. And it's just this kind of like resourceful thing. It's like there's no place in the world that's too bad to be for a short period of time. It's when you just hang out there for forever, like the DMV. The DMV actually isn't a horrific place. It's that it's very difficult to exit it with any kind of sense of accomplishment, right? Because you go in there and you go see this lady, you go see that lady, and then she tells you got to go see that lady, and then she says you got to go back to your house, and then, you know what I mean? And it's like spiritually, you don't leave the DMV until you get the piece of paper that you need so that you can drive your car around. And it's the ongoing it's the cyclical nature, it's the recursive nature that's a problem. And it's that capacity to kind of step back and say, it's time to exit this, and to exit it definitively. Have you ever been behind someone on the interstate who kind of tentatively exited? You're going like 75 or 90, and there's some person in front of you who's kind of straddling the lane between the exit, and then they go this way and they go that way. And it's not a good thing to do. Do you know what I'm saying? You're going to cause a crash, or you're going to miss the exit, and you're going to have to drive all the way around the planet, or at least into the next exit, and then turn around and go back. You want to exit these things definitively. I'm done worrying for now. You know what I mean? I'm done worrying for now. I'm going to exit it and I'm going to go somewhere else. And if you're not willing to do that, what we can do is we can build a new loop in you where you worry about things that you're not thinking about because of how much time you're worrying about the same shit that you always do. And sometimes that could be really useful. That's like that functional fear. It's like if you've got fake fears or counterfeit fears or fears that aren't serving you, what you do is that you just, instead of trying to layer happy butterfly feelings on top of it, you layer a fear that points you in the opposite direction. Because it's really hard. It's hard to get happiness or peace to kind of adhere to a fear because that fear is slippery and it's like all those pleasant thoughts just kind of slip right off. But it's interesting. Fear to fear is sort of like a Velcro. And so it's like if I'm worried about what people think about me, why am I doing that? Well, I'm doing it because I'm not worried enough about wasting my life worrying about what other people think about me. And so what I do is I take a worry about worrying too much. I kind of layer it on top like this and it sticks. Do you know what I'm saying? And that one is easy to exit because I can recognize it because it's new and novel to me and it's not my wheelhouse of worry. It's a different one. And I want to get out of there as fast as I can, kind of like the DMV. So I don't linger at the DMV. I don't try to strike up conversation with people, or if someone's like printing off my form, I don't try to distract them so that they'll talk to me so I can hang out. I want to get in and out as fast as I can, and therefore I do get in and out as fast as I can. And so when you're in the worry thing, when you're in the fear thing, you want to say that I'm here for a reason. Let me figure out what I can do, if anything, and if not, let me get the hell out of here quickly. It's just a different way of kind of interacting with these experiences, but it works. It works really well.
Yeah, you've got to, that's the thing, is a commitment to doing what works and watching and paying attention. It's just, we're so willing to engage in things that don't work just because we're so used to doing them. And when you can start finding these strategies and saying, I recognize. And then when you learn GNM on top of that and you see the fact that, this ongoing conflict and this ongoing fear and this ongoing worry, it's not just bottled up in your head, but it's informing your tissues about what they should be doing to help you to get out of the situation. And that's the thing too. And that's why fear really is so functional. It really is. Like, that adaptive capacity of the body is amazing. We wouldn't want to not have the ability to break down and build up tissues. I mean, we wouldn't want to not have that ability, because that means that we wouldn't be adaptable to our environments. That's the reason that humans are, doing the things that we're doing. Because of the fact that we're so adaptable, we change, we adapt, we mold, we have a fear, we experience a challenge, there's a problem, it's too cold, there's too much sun, and our body, it's like super smart, and it adapts. It will make physiological changes to allow you to better survive in that environment for a brief period of time, so you can get out of it. I mean, but that whole process, it's good that it's there. It's functional. Fear is functional, and it should be functional. But when we have a dysfunctional relationship to it, when we have no exit strategies, when we don't know how to stop doing something that clearly isn't working, it's not accomplishing anything. It's like, I mean, that feeling after you've worried all day, it's just like that spinning tire, like you're exhausted, you're physically just drained, but you haven't gone anywhere. Like, it's meant to take you, the fear is meant to take you somewhere, to a new place, a new physical location, a new mental, emotional location. It's just, we are stuck. And you have to start looking for those exits so that you can get off of this crazy train and start like living your life the way you want to live it. That's the thing that most people want, is like they experience it. They're maybe getting to the edge of awareness that like they know this isn't serving them, but they just don't know how to get off. And a lot of strategies out there, they don't get you off of it. And that's why they don't work long term. They might work for a little bit, like they distract you, I feel like. But if those fears and things are rooted and you don't have true exit strategies for them, unfortunately, they do come back. Like the question that Danielle had is like, they do keep coming back. And it's like, why does this keep coming back?
Crazy Train's an Ozzy Osbourne song.
Oh, is there? I don't know Ozzy Osbourne anything.
Yeah. It's the only one I know. It's like it's the only one I hear on the radio.
Steve will start singing it for us now.
The interesting thing about, maybe next time, we can keep it coming back for more. The interesting thing about the whole, like, if it keeps coming back, is like, if you've ever seen someone, or if you've ever seen me, you've seen someone do this, is that like you can exit an interstate, and sometimes the re-entry to the interstate is right there, and you drive straight across, or you find yourself in a lane where like sometimes it's weird, and there's like a lane specifically for doing that, you know what I mean? And you can always find myself kind of in the wrong lane. And so that's an interesting thing. And also sometimes it's like the whole, I don't know if you were on when we were talking about the OCD thing, it's like there is one big test operate, test exit, and inside of it there's tons of little ones. And what happens is I exit from this one, and I go to this one, and then I go to this one, and I go to that one, you know what I mean? And for me, kind of exiting one worry situation is basically entering into worry of a slight variation. Instead of David's Phil who's mad at me, or something like that. Do you know what I mean? And it's kind of like learning to recognize that. I think one thing is that when you exit this, you have to have somewhere very specific that you're going instead. Because particularly if we've been doing something for a really long period of time, there is a that-shaped space or void in our brain, in our mind, in our experience, in our spirit. I mean, pretty much anything you could pretty much describe, about like about isness. There is a that-shaped hole there, and you have to sort of build something else to take that place, or reconstruct things around it. Because I mean, if I do something for a long period of time, it's amazing the extent to which my lifestyle begins to sort of conform to that particular activity. And if it's worry, there are aspects of my lifestyle that will conform to worry. Things that I won't even necessarily look at and say, oh yeah, that's there because of how much I worry, or that's there to facilitate my worrying, or that's not different than it is because I've spent so much the last 5 years worrying about whatever. You don't realize that, we shape our environment and our environment shapes you. And I think that applies to our room, and it applies to our brain. So the thoughts that we think kind of influence sort of the neural connections and all this different stuff in the brain. And then the connections in the brain and the configuration tends to influence the things that's easy for us to think. You know what I'm saying? And so there's this whole process. And for me, the solution in general is going to be giving you somewhere very specific, so that when you exit one, you don't just by default, and this will be this way for a while, the default will be just to get back on the worry highway. Because, unless there's big blaring neon lights at the you come, so you take the exit, you go to the light where you turn left or right or get back on the interstate. There has to be this captivating, and I don't know if you're a visual person, it might literally be a huge neon sign and an arrow pointing that way, and it's like the shit you want to do in life is down there, and it's going to feel irresponsible to not get back on the highway for a while. You just have to learn how to be how to feel irresponsible, and how to feel very comfortable feeling irresponsible about not doing what doesn't work. That's an immensely freeing and liberating thing, and I give people a lot of permission. I mean, it's one of the things that I encourage you. If you're feeling irresponsible because you're not doing what doesn't work, that feeling is a very good feeling. That feeling is a sign that you're heading in the right direction. And really, it's going to be having something that is sufficiently captivating to you that the worry and the pull that the worry exerts on you it may still be there, but it's not enough. Do you know what I'm saying? It's not enough to pull you off course. And a lot of the times what happens is that you get five minutes, maybe, quarter mile down that those don't line up. Okay. You get quarter mile down the road, right? And then you say, oh my God, I got to turn around, and you turn around to get back on the worry highway, because there's something soothing and comfortable about worrying, because at least then you don't worry about not worrying about something that you should. And I think the only thing to cure the worry about not worrying about something that you should is the worry that you're wasting time worrying about something that you shouldn't. That's that kind of layering and that stacking. It's like, okay, if we've got a brain that's geared to worry, and we've got and it's like, you want to worry about something, let's worry about the fact that we're not doing wonderful things right now, experiencing, the heights of ecstasy in this everyday normal moment, because I'm worrying about dumb shit that doesn't matter, or because I'm worrying about something that I've done everything I can already do about right now. And so you have to sometimes leverage the skills that a person already has. Do you know what I'm saying? And be willing to work with what it is that your brain happens to be really good at right now. It's not a problem. It's a contextual thing. And if you can start kind of being more conscious about it, I think you can leverage it. I think that every problem is the lever sort of that moves the solution. And every problem, behavior placed into a right context or handled in the right way becomes not only its own solution, but becomes a potentially useful thing. And so I would just start playing with it. I don't resist it. Do you know what I'm saying? Tinker with it and experiment with it. Resisting is, I have this, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example. I've got this like plastic component. I'm trying to mount a TV to the wall, say, and there's a piece that won't bend the way I want it to. And so I just try to force it, and then I break it. And then I got to call Samsung, and I got to pay $45 for a little piece of plastic so I can, that's emotional resistance. That's suffering. It doesn't work. Tinkering is more kind of like, let me sort of tap it here. Let me sort of go this way. Let me reread the instructions. Let me see if there's something I can do to get this thing moving, because this piece seems stuck. This piece over here seems too loose. Seems like if I could get this piece unstuck, it would allow me to tighten things up so this piece over here wouldn't be so loose and everything would kind of be balanced, so that we get an appropriate amount of tension. A lot of it too is people worry so much that they don't take action in their life, and they don't create a lot of things they could be creating. And sometimes when all my brain really has to work with is worry, it thinks that if we stop worrying, we're not going to do anything else. And then bad stuff's going to happen. But over time, what you can do is start to kind of like engineer proactive behaviors. You can start, and I don't know about you specifically, but if I can begin to kind of do maybe not a complete kind of buyout where I say, okay, zero worry, all action. Let me exchange 1 unit of worry for 1 unit of action. Okay, did you like that? Did that work? Okay, brain, part of you that's worried about things, was that okay? Is that safe? Okay, let's try another unit now. So we did 2 things today, really proactive, conscious things that we did to try to create the outcomes that we wanted in life. Can we then kind of give up maybe another percent? And it'd be like a percent by percent buyout of the worry. Do you know what I mean? Supplanting it with really conscious and intentional action of creating things that you want to create in your life. There's a lot of ways. It's just incessant experimentation and finding what works for you. So you go try that, and if it doesn't work, come back and tell us, and we'll try something different. That really is like that's the bottom line of what's going to happen, because everything's a little different.
That's why it's good to have Steve in your ear all the time and helping you with things, because he's really good at helping you like try a new thing, tinker, and play with your experience so that you can improve it. And now's the time where we wrap up the video, because we got to get to bed in the 9s.
Oh my God.
So thank you guys for being here. If you are interested in joining Resolve, I think there's like 30 minutes to still get in on the Cyber Monday deal. Let us know how we can help you if you want coaching. Our course, the Ever Better Life course, is phenomenal for building this structure and figuring out how you do things and finding your off-ramp so that you can get out of worry cycles and start experiencing life in the way that you want to. That's what we're all about, improving experience and having an ever better life. So have a great night, and we'll see you next time.
Good night.